Hello, everyone. Welcome to Aura's virtual town halls. I hope that you guys having a wonderful Monday. Today, I'm really excited to be having a conversation with a special friend and someone that is going to answer all of our questions around COVID-19 or the questions that we have around COVID-19. In the recent days, we see a rising surge in the numbers of COVID cases. So I definitely have a lot of questions for Dr. Nakhasi, and he is an advisor for LA County for the Department of Public Health Services, and he also has a private practice. And in the recent days, since the pandemic started, he has been someone that has been very involved in informing our community about the latest research, the statistics, also how this pandemic affects more people of color than other people, for example. So he's going to tell us a lot more about that. But with no further ado, let me welcome Dr. Atul Nakhasi. Hello.
Hey there. Thank you, Aura. I appreciate you hosting this. It's such an important dialogue right now in the midst of this pandemic, especially with what we're seeing across the country and in California with increasing cases. So I'm happy this is a very timely conversation to have. I'm happy to be here, and you've been a great friend over the months here recently. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I guess first I wanted to ask you how did you ended up being so informed about the pandemic? What's your background? Where do you work right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a couple roles. So one is I'm a primary care doctor in one of our underserved clinics in the Watts Compton area. So a physician there for mostly our communities of color within the South Central Los Angeles area. And then I did play a role. I was in the COVID surge hospital that was just opened by the governor and the board of supervisors, the elected officials in the months of April and in May. So as a physician in the hospital. And then I also serve as a policy advisor to our city health, county health system, the LA County Department of Health Services. So this health system is actually the second largest public health system in the United States of America. Take care of about 600,000 patients. 80% of our patients make under $18,000 a year, and they live on that aura. So it's a very vulnerable group of patients who depend on our safety net health system. So I also advise the health system on policies, and there's quite a few now on COVID and our response to it, and how do we take care of the most vulnerable patients in the midst of a pandemic.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that that's such an important work, and not just for the pandemic, but there's so many groups that are affected by COVID-19, from Latinos, Blacks, from people that are low income, from our unsheltered community that lives on the streets, from people that might have already a pre-existing condition that makes them more vulnerable to the virus. But, let's just take this from very basic, knowledge, and let's take our audience let's recap for our audience. What is COVID-19 again? I mean, we know that it's a virus, but how much do we know of what this virus is now?
Exactly. That's a great question. Let's start with the very basics, because there is a ton of misinformation out there, a ton of misinformation. So coronavirus is a type of virus within the corona family. Aura, we actually have many common cold coronaviruses. So that's what many of us are used to. Many of us will get the coronavirus common cold version, every few years or every year. It's one of the common cold viruses. What makes this different, though, is that this is a lot more serious, and we've never seen this version in the human species ever before. For the first time in human history, this entered the human species in December in China. And so it's a lot more lethal. It's completely new to our immune system and our bodies. But this has happened before, actually. So SARS was also a brand new version of the coronavirus that we had never seen back in 2002, 2003 about. And very lethal again. Luckily, that was able to be controlled in a way, unfortunately, COVID-19 hasn't. So they're all coronaviruses, the ones we're most common with are the common cold ones, but every now and then a new version will enter from an animal species. We believe this one entered from a bat and then to maybe an intermediary animal and then to a human. And now it's become a global pandemic over 200 countries. Millions and millions of people infected, and we still don't know where this is to go. So it is a virus, a family of viruses we've been familiar with, but a new version that is new for the first time to the human species, which is why it's causing all these challenges. We don't have a vaccine. We're still bringing out treatments. Everyone is vulnerable and susceptible because no one's ever had it before, and no one's ever had any antibodies to it. So that's kind of the context of what this virus is and why it's so dangerous.
So, quick question for you, because not long ago I actually had a whole virtual conversation with a few people online about what makes the coronavirus, and you explained that we believe that it comes from an animal transmission. So there is no real clinical evidence that this was designed in a lab.
There is not. That's actually been a very common misconception out there. To this point, there is no evidence to suggest that this has been developed in a lab. A lot of things are studied in labs, so we learn more about viruses and bacteria and the different types of species that exist in the world, but there's no evidence to suggest that. In fact, if you look at the latest breaking research, Aura, it suggests that this COVID-19 has been around for about 40 to 60 years, living in another animal. They traced back, this has been around actually. They traced back the genes, back, and they looked where that mutation occurred. That made it infectious and lethal in humans. That mutation actually occurred 40 to 60 years ago, and it was circulating hidden in another animal species until December. So this virus actually has been around the kind of animal kingdom, you could say, for several decades. They looked back at the genetics when this version happened, but now there was some sentinel event in China. People feel it was a seafood market at the moment where there was that intermediary animal, back to the intermediary animal, and then to humans. So that is how the latest evidence suggests it came to us.
So, Dr. Nakhasi, so basically, yes, and we have heard about the wet markets in China and how it is believed that it entered through there. So was it that somebody bought an animal and cooked it in a soup and ate it, and then we got coronavirus, or how this actually happened?
Yeah, to be determined. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. Although I'm sure
or was it like an animal bite us, or like it's pretty fascinating. And I ask you this because there's so many theories, and I every day get a new video about, oh no, the government has been making this disease for us for some sort of warfare. So that's why I know it's a comical question, but I want to just make sure that it's clarified.
I lost count of all the conspiracy theories. All right, I've lost count, so there'll be a new one tomorrow.
Amazing. Well, so for those of you that are just joining, welcome. I'm having a conversation with Dr. Nakhasi. He advises LA County on matters of public health, and he also has a private practice where he works with underserved communities and Watts. We're talking about COVID-19 and its the latest research, the latest statistics. Okay, so now we were in this very quarantine. We've been quarantined, and a couple of weeks ago we started to kind of get back the economy back to reopen. And now we see the surge in cases of COVID-19. Tell us what our opinions are in
Are you there? You see me? Definitely. Are you able to hear me, Aura? Okay. All right.
I think we're back. And I think
Aura, can you hear me?
I cannot see you on Instagram though. I think you got to turn your camera around.
All right.
Let's
see. Perfect.
There you go. Okay, so you're back.
All right. Are you good?
So my question was, why do you think we're seeing the numbers of COVID-19 increasing now? Back again, when we're planning the curve.
Yeah, this is talked about questions right now. And the reason is we've heard a lot of elected officials, even as high as the vice president, talk about testing. We've been testing more. And is that leading to us detecting more cases? So we have some good insights here. We looked at the California data, Aura, and we were testing about 55,000 people a day here in California, and that has increased to about 80,000 a day. So testing did go up. That is true. People who mentioned testing has gone up. But it does not explain everything. The reason is testing has went up about 40%, but cases have gone up 100%. So a big difference that testing is catching more people, but the cases are increasing more than even the testing is
actual testing that we're doing. That's such a great point.
Exactly. So people, that's a really important point to understand, that the testing 40% more increase, but cases 100% more increase. Where's that 60% difference? It's more spread, further and faster of COVID. So then the question is, why is this happening? So from what we know thus far, because of us trying to rephase, reopen, interact more, we're all interacting more as we're trying to get the economy, we knew cases would go up. The challenge is they're going up faster than we anticipated, to the point that as of this morning, my ICUs within our four hospitals here in the safety net, we're down to 24 beds as of this morning.
Wow. So the system is really stressed right now.
We are one. I should caveat, we are one system in Los Angeles, so there are many health systems, but we're the safety net system. We take care of low income and vulnerable patients across all of LA County. We, as of this morning, Aura, we had more COVID cases in our hospital than the entire pandemic. We have 154 COVID patients as of this morning across our 4 hospitals. That's more than any day in June, any day in May, any day in April, any day in March, and we're down to 24 beds this morning within our health system. ICU beds. So we are stressed. It goes to the point. It's not only that we're catching more people through testing, we are actually seeing more cases spread further and faster. And the last thing we need is to be in the situation Montgomery, Alabama was. They had 0 ICU beds left. Houston, Texas, they were down to a handful of beds. They had to send patients elsewhere. Imperial County was sending patients up to the Bay Area because they were running out of beds. So this is something we have to watch very carefully in the next set of days or weeks. We cannot have LA County run out of beds. Imperial County is sending patients to SF. Houston has no beds. Montgomery, Alabama has no beds. We are in a critical juncture here.
So okay, so we talked about testing, but testing has increased, but the numbers have increased more. So we cannot maybe blame testing for the people out there that are blaming testing. What are some of the reasons, or what is the reason that you think these cases are increasing? And I specifically, go ahead.
That's a great question. So we know a few important things, Aura. One is cases are increasing disproportionately in young people, folks like you and me. Folks like you and me, generally folks in their 20s, 30s, into their late 30s, in that age group, 20s to 30s, they're increasing. We have data on this. In California, 44% of all cases this month in June were in those under 35 years of age.
In that bracket, younger people.
In that bracket.
I'm not in that bracket, by the way, but yes.
Which bracket are you in, Aura? I'm kidding. We'll say you're,
But thank you.
We'll say you're under in that bracket. 35 and under.
I get it. It's in the younger bracket.
It's the younger bracket. And so you're an honorary member of the young bracket. Always. Forever. But look at Florida, same thing. The average age for cases in March in Florida was 65 years of age, 65. You know what it is now, the average age of cases in Florida? The average age now is 35. So a drastic difference here between the 65 and the 35, a big difference in Florida even. There were 65 years of age average case in March and now 35 years old. So that's the trend we're noticing is young individuals are interacting more, they're out more, they're with friends, the workplace, and it's leading to higher transmission of COVID in this moment.
Okay, so basically younger people are getting sick, and I guess the big question is the why, and like I am a very active person in the sense of my community organizing and activism. And yes, I do work out, but that's not what I'm trying to say here. And I have gotten a lot of comments about protesters being the problem. And actually, that is the protesters who are causing the surge of the COVID-19. Now, I just want to put a few things in context because there were maybe a few protests, maybe 5 maximum, let's say 10 protests, compared to all of the months where we have seen, people interacting and such. So I want to get your take on that also because, and again, this is not scientific, what I'm going to say, but none of the people that I know that I have been protesting with or my community of my social justice community are sick. None of us. So what's going on? Who's getting sick and why? So what is it? Why is it that some people are getting sick and others don't?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aura. So I'll give two examples here, very specific examples. There is a lot of asymptomatic transmission, no symptoms, a lot of that. So there was a study in the top medical journal in the world, the New England Journal of Medicine. They looked at all the patients on the Diamond Princess cruise who got infected.
Right.
There were 3,000 patients on that cruise. 700 of them were positive. They swabbed every single one of them with that swab no one wants through the nose. They swabbed all of them. 700 were positive. Guess how many were asymptomatic, Aura, of those 700?
Half of them?
Half. 400. You're right.
Wow.
400 of those 700 who were all of those 700 were COVID positive.
Everybody in the ship and everybody in that boat had COVID-19. Everybody tested positive.
So 700 out of the 3,000. 3,000 total, 700 positive, but of the 700, 400 no symptoms, 300 symptoms. So what does that tell us? And Aura, I'll be honest, they looked at those 400 people and they followed them for a week or two. Only 10% ended up developing symptoms. 90% of them stayed asymptomatic the whole time for 2 weeks. They didn't know.
Wow.
They didn't know. So if you have no idea, you have no symptoms, you might be exposed, talking to your neighbor at the mailbox. You might be exposed takeout with someone who's coughing next to you waiting in line. You might be exposed on the hike if you share the same bathroom handle. We don't, all of these are possible exposures, and you might not have any symptoms. So you're right. A lot of us young individuals especially won't get symptoms because we're generally age goes with health. You know, those who are younger tend to be have stronger immune systems, tend to be healthier. That's not always the case. Many young people do have immunocompromised conditions or health conditions, but most young people tend to be healthier than older people. And so cases in young people are tricky. There's a silver lining. The good is we don't get as critically ill as many of the old people do at the same level or the same rate, but we don't know we have it. So we pass it on to everyone. So that's the silver lining. There's a good to it that young healthy don't get as sick with it, but there's a bad to it. And the studies have shown that about half of the cases in some studies have been shown to be asymptomatic. So when we talk about any level of activity outdoors or interacting with another human, even in a restaurant or indoors, it's a potential for transmission, even without knowing it.
Got it. So, for example, I can have a super strong immune system. I can be testing right now positive and have no symptoms whatsoever, maybe even ever, but then transmit it, pass it on to somebody, and they might not have the same immune system as I do, and then they get like the real strong effects.
Exactly. So you might have an exposure and have it be contagious for about 10 to 14 days without even knowing it. And then it goes to a friend who might not even know it, but then it goes to their grandma who's critically ill.
Ah, wow. So this is kind of how we, so you're a doctor, you're in the latest research. I just saw this question coming through here. Is it true? Is this a virus or is it a bacteria?
That's a great question. It is 100% a virus, 100% a virus. And let me just say this. Bacteria can live on their own. They don't need a human host. Virus cannot live. It needs the human cells, the human host to replicate, reproduce, and spread. So there's a big difference between those two types of infections. Bacteria, we use antibiotics. We can wipe them out with antibiotics. Virus, we use antiviral medications, which we don't have any really good ones. There's one, remdesivir, which has shown some benefit, but not significant enough yet. So there's a big difference. It is definitely a virus. We know that for a fact.
Okay, amazing. So I guess my next question, and we will return to the initial question about how are people getting infected, and with the opening of the economy. I have been very reserved. Again, I reserve my going out to mingle with other people to my activism. I don't go to restaurants. Does it make a difference that when we are marching or protesting, we're outdoors, outside, versus being in a restaurant indoors, having dinner with some friends?
That's a great question, Aura. Very popular question right now. What is the risk of activities? Summer activities, protesting, going to the beach, barbecue. Let's break it down in a very quick way. There are 3 factors that matter: space, time, and people.
Interesting.
You want to maximize. This is good to take note of when you're thinking about, is this a safe activity?
You all take notes of this.
Bring out the pens. I got pen and paper.
There you go.
Well, nowadays, take them onto your phone. And so 3 variables matter when you're thinking about risk, whether it's a protest or going to the pharmacy or having dinner with friends in your home. Space, time, and people. You want to maximize space. You want as much space, as much open environment, spread out as possible. Maximize space. You want to minimize time. The more you want less time with other human beings, that means less chance the virus spreads human to human. Space, time, people. Finally, people. You want less people. Fewer people, the better, less chance you get it from someone else. So let me give you 2 specific examples.
Beautiful.
Going on a jog on your own for a half hour in an open area that's not a popular track, and you're by yourself. That's 1 person. Time is limited, 30 minutes. Space is immense, outdoors, the whole area. All good variables. Let's take something in the middle. You have a barbecue. It's enclosed outdoors, like a patio, balcony, or outdoor grass area of a home, right? So it's outdoors but enclosed. It's 3 to 5 people. and it's 2 or 3 hours. You're doing a barbecue, right? So it's less space than the jog, it's more time than the jog, and it's more people than the jog. So that's more medium risk.
Medium risk.
Now, let's take an event. Let's say there's a wedding or even a funeral, a big, large scale event. For a wedding, let's say, is 4 or 5 hours, right? And so you have even more time. You have hundreds of people, 100, 200, 300 people, and you have a space. It's a hall, but it's all indoors, right?
Right.
So now you're talking very high risk activity. So that's how I would think about risk when we're thinking about activities, is what is the space, time, and people? And a fast rule, Aura, to remember is outdoor better than indoor, less people better than more people, less time better than more time, and mask better than no mask.
Okay, hold on. Let's just back it up. So repeat that 3 formula that we need to remember.
Yeah. So outdoor better than indoor.
Okay.
That's space. Less people better than more people.
Okay.
That's people. Less time better than more time. That's time.
Got it.
And then the last one is mask better than no mask. And there's good evidence on masks preventing transmission, and we can get into that too.
Please, let's get into that, because actually in preparation to this talk, I put out a survey, on Twitter, and my Twitter account, and also on Instagram. And I basically asked if people thought that wearing a mask was helping mitigating, the getting contagious of COVID-19. And it was not 100%. So there are people out there that think it's not good. So let's dive into the idea of the mask. And we've seen, I was just watching a video last night from a city in Florida where the residents were outraged about wearing the mask. Just here in California, in Orange County, we see that the residents have gone above and beyond to now wear masks, and we see a lot of the cases in Orange County also increase. Yep. So let's talk about masks.
Let's do that. And a shout out to colleagues joining in as well. I've seen a few familiar faces, including a hometown friend, Orja. It's good to see you, and other colleagues who are joining us. And Aura, you're right. We have our work cut out for us. No, the mask thing has been so politicized. Yeah. Let's break it down. Let's take 60 seconds, break down the science.
Let's do it.
So there was a major article in the journal Lancet, one of the top 5 journals in the world. They looked at 6 continents, 26,000 people, and they looked at, did wearing masks decrease transmission of COVID from that person to other people? What did they find? This was a groundbreaking study. It came out a few weeks ago. It's the latest evidence on, do masks work or do they not? The results: wearing a mask decreased transmission of COVID from 17% down to 3%. Eye protection decreased COVID transmission from 16% down to the single digits. And social distancing of more than 3 feet also decreased by double digits from the teens down to the single digits. So all 3 interventions, masks, eye protection, social distancing, exactly. We're gonna have to get some fancy eye protection.
I already have my goggles. When I go on my protest, I wear my mask, I wear goggles. I'm ready.
You're ready. Yeah, you're right. You're ready. You're a role model. We gotta follow your footsteps. The Orange County has been challenging. The public health information officer there resigned. Is very tragic. Very tragic. She resigned because of threats. Because of this mask issue has become so controversial. It shouldn't. Let's just do what's right. And the evidence is very clear. Transmission decreases significantly. And Aura, the last point I'll make, there was a study, it just came out last week. It said if 95% of the United States wore masks, they simulated the trajectory of the infection.
Wow. So we really, really need to take it seriously.
If 95, you're completely right. If 95% of the country wore masks, we would save 30,000 American lives.
Wow.
30,000.
So
that's someone's grandma, someone's grandfather, someone's parent, someone's sibling, right? Those are people. And so this just came out last week too. So masks make a difference, and we really need to do a good job at getting that word out.
Yeah. So I guess my second question around the mask is that I heard the argument on TV, and I actually had a friend that called me to say not to wear the mask because we were breathing the CO2 that we were emitting, when we exhale. How true is that wearing the mask is bad for our health? Not to not contract coronavirus, but for our health.
Yeah, good question. And there's so much out there. I mean, it's almost like where did this virus come? Conspiracy theories. The number of theories on masks is like astronomical. We can have a new town hall next week and debate again. So let's break that down. There's a difference between protection of nano-sized virus particles and breathability, which is the exchange of air. Two different concepts, Aura. The masks block the virus particles. Many of the masks, the ones that have been tested for breathability, are completely fine. They let you exchange carbon dioxide out and bring in oxygen in. So they're completely separate topics in a sense. The breathability is different than the virus blocking properties of the mask. And the standard masks that are out there generally let you have plenty of breathability to allow carbon dioxide out.
Good to know.
Yeah. I'm gonna clip this part.
I'm gonna clip this part for to make little clips to send around, because I think this is a big part. Now, you work in a hospital. Yeah. You advise the city, the county of Los Angeles, and their public health services department. How true it is that actually that this disease doesn't exist, that the government and the hospitals are marking people as sick with COVID-19 because they're getting insurance money from these deaths and this illness. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And also, it's good to see Jess Prey, a good dear friend of mine too from Iowa, joining. Good to see you here. It's a very personal question because I worked in that COVID hospital. I'll give you an example. I would call the husband of a patient of mine who is critically ill, and I'd call him every few days and give an update on the patient's status, his spouse, his wife for many years. And we thought we were making some progress. Her oxygen levels were improving. She needed less and less support on the breathing machine. We were able to bring it down 70, 60, 50, 40%. We thought we were getting there. And then she developed this tragic cytokine storm, this just massive amount of inflammation from reacting to the virus. And her kidneys started failing, and her blood pressure started dropping, and her heart stopped. And she died. And it was just tragic. She was in the field herself. She was a nurse herself, taking care of sick people with COVID, and had it herself. And now her 2 children will grow up motherless. They won't have a mother to see them walk across the graduation stage. They won't have a mother to be there when they take their wedding vows or have their grandchildren. And that is tragic. So this is as real as possible. I was there with that patient bedside day in and day out. It is as real as can be, and people are losing their lives to this. And so to the naysayers of the virus, it is as real as possible. And we've seen that there have been many posts of people who initially took it not as seriously and eventually contracted it. There's a well-known case in Florida where a man did not believe the importance of the masks, and then he contracted it, and his wife contracted it, and she was in the ICU, and he had started to forgive himself if she were to die, because he got to that point of finally realizing the seriousness of this situation. He had recovered. I still don't know what ever ended up ultimately happening to his wife, but he had to make peace inside his soul that his wife may die from him contracting it and passing to a loved one. So it's as real as can be. And those are just a couple anecdotes from the front lines that bring that to life.
Right. Yeah. I oftentimes I have heard this from a few people. Oh, that it's not as bad. It's not as bad as you think. Actually, the hospitals are marking it that way because they're getting money out of, I don't know who they're getting money out of from, but the insurance, I guess, I'm not sure. But I have heard that argument, so I'm pleased to hear that you yourself have not experienced that kind of behavior, because it's sad. It's extremely sad. I mean, it's completely wrecked our economy, which is the stress that everybody's feeling. Not only we need to flatten the curve on our lives that are on the line, but also, we have a huge issue with our economy. People can't pay the rent. People, cannot make ends meet. And that's, extremely sad in terms of, how we've been dealing with, with COVID-19. Let's talk about the communities that are being most affected by the pandemic. I spoke to a good friend of mine that lives in East LA, and she said, oh my God, like right now it's really become so permanent in our community that more and more people are getting sick, specifically in the Latino community, in the Latinx and Latino community, where more families live together, where they don't have the type of jobs where they can work from home, where you are a individual that maybe take the bus because you are low income. So let's remember, guys, that for a lot of us that can't stay home is a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to stay home and work from home. So what are your takes and your insights around the people that are most affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, great question, Aura, and thank you for bringing much needed attention to this. It's needs a lot more awareness and attention to the issues on how it's disproportionately affecting different groups and individuals. I'll give some of the latest data. We looked at the data in New York, in Chicago, in Louisiana. The patterns are the same. In New York, individuals were dying at double the rate within the community, the Latino and the Black community, double the rate of mortality on COVID in New York City. In Chicago, 1.5 times higher mortality, the Latino community, 3 times higher mortality, the Black community in Chicago.
Wow.
In Louisiana, at Ochsner Health System, this was in the New England Journal of Medicine just weeks ago, a major premier medical journal. They looked at all of their dozens of hospitals, and although the Black population represented 30% of their hospital system patients, it was 70% of their COVID cases and 70% of their deaths from COVID were within the Black population. So this is a pattern that we are seeing from city to city, state to state. It is disproportionately affecting communities of color. And that's really a call to awareness and to action for all of us involved in this pandemic, because we absolutely need to take care of those who are most affected and the vulnerable. And so we're seeing that pattern, and it's really tragic. And then the second question that comes out of that is why? And you hit on that, and I'll just elaborate a little bit on that. So there was a study in the San Francisco area. They did testing across the Mission Bay area, the Mission District. And 95% of those who were positive for COVID, Aura, were Latino. 95% that they tested in the Mission District in San Francisco. But you know what? The one other thing that was common amongst everyone who was positive, 90% were essential workers. They were essential.
Wow.
They did not have the luxury or the privilege, as you said, to stay at home, to telework, to take the time or have the income security to be away from work. And so we are seeing that essential workers are running the foundation of the economy, our public transportation, our food processing, our meat packing, our delivery, our packages, our mental services, keeping the clinic operations going. And so the essential workers are critical, and they are exposed. They're as exposed as I am as a physician in the clinic.
Right.
Our nurses, we think about our nurses and doctors as frontline heroes, but our essential workers are our heroes. They are keeping everything running and exposing themselves on the front lines. They're keeping our bus lines, our commuter lines, our food preparation and processing all going. So I think it's a really important point that this is a group we need to really do a much better job of understanding the impact it's having. And the data bears that out, Aura.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to lift up also the issue of a lot of folks being undocumented and not being able to get any support from the government. Not being able to get any of the stimulus package, not being able to ask for unemployment, so they are forced to work. And I just want to remind folks, because sometimes we don't see eye to eye when it comes to immigration, but let's not forget that these folks are essential workers, as you're mentioning, that are keeping our society and our country moving and flowing. So that's something that we also need to address. And part of my work also with Ready to Help, mutual aid community network that I founded, is to support folks that don't have enough to buy groceries and food. And we have been very, very, very active with that. And we see a lot more people, especially recently, this past week, we saw a lot more folks coming in and asking for support. But let's talk about the African American community, because they're also very highly affected. And a lot of them is because they have underlying conditions, and they have environmental circumstances that are making them more prone to not survive coronavirus.
Yeah, and we can break down the data. Communities of color are carrying a higher burden of chronic diseases. We know that. The science has shown that conditions like diabetes and hypertension are at higher rates within our communities of colors. And we know those are risk factors for not doing well with COVID. So you're completely right. Like, that is a reality we need to grapple with and understand that we need to do a much better job within our communities of color, because they already have underlying conditions at a higher rate that will predispose them from outcomes that are not good with COVID. And to go also a little bit on the uninsured side, we are very lucky here in Los Angeles that we have a health insurance program for the uninsured. My Health FA that covers insurance for people who are undocumented within Los Angeles County. We also have a very promising program that the governor unveiled to offer income assistance to those who are undocumented. Only half of those funds have been used so far. So this is actually a call to awareness that if you are within the undocumented community, if you have friends, if you have colleagues, if you have family members, please, as of about a week ago, only half of the funds allocated by the governor were used to help support those communities. So we're a little fortunate in California to be much more supportive of all of our communities here. But it goes to a bigger point, Ara. This virus started in China, and it is now ravaging the United States, our community. Look at Houston, Alabama. Look at what happened in New York and Boston. And so it speaks to the reality. We are a global community. We are a global world. What one person does in Wuhan, China, has dramatic impact to millions of lives across the world. And this is our living reality. And so we have to awaken to the reality that we are all interconnected. The fabric of society is interconnected, and there is no one we can leave behind, because when you leave behind your vulnerable, it ends up affecting everyone else downstream in some capacity, in some manner. So I think this is an awakening call to strengthen the social fabric and the safety net system within the United States, because COVID has only aggravated and exploited longstanding health inequities within this country. And I'm seeing that firsthand within my community of Compton and Watts.
Right, absolutely. So folks are asking if you could repeat the information about the resources for undocumented folks, or if you can send to me, I'll be happy to add them to the chat as well.
Yeah, if you could leave some contact information or send us a private chat, I would love to. I don't have the website link right offhand, but the program is in existence. They have funds at the moment as of
What is it called, the program?
I'll have to get back to you, because I don't want to misspell the name, but my social workers are the ones who've been contacting all our patients with the exact information. If you actually Google undocumented COVID resources, you should get to the governor and the state's website to be able to access that. I would love to get specific program and information. I just don't have it right off the top of my head. My social workers would 100% have that for everyone.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for your question. And I will be sure to circle back with Dr. Nakhasi and share with you guys, the resources that we get. So earlier, somebody was asking if we're going to have COVID forever. If COVID is going to exist forever. Okay.
Hera,
So my question is COVID?
I lost you for a second. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is COVID-19 going to last for? And we always going to have a strain of COVID somehow.
It's a great question. This may become something that we end up having an annual COVID shot like we have the flu. The flu has been around since the time of Hippocrates. We're talking more than a couple thousand years. The flu has been around in the human species. Unfortunately, it seems like COVID will be around. The question will be, how will we vaccinate and protect and give people immunity so that we protect the vulnerable and society from COVID? But you are right. It is looking like COVID will be a part of the human species and human life for the years to come. And it'll be a matter of how do we protect ourselves and ultimately get a vaccine that we all would have to offer to protect ourselves. And on that point, our COVID is mutating. We know that. We've looked at it. It's changing. We might need a vaccine every 2 years. We might need one every 4 years. We might need a booster. We might need one shot now and one shot in 6 months. We don't know. All those questions are up in the air. If we need 2 shots, that's 600 million doses of the vaccine for the country of 300 million of the United States.
What are the developments now that we're talking about vaccines? What are the developments around a vaccine? Are we close? Are we super far? Is it already being approved in other countries but not in the United States yet?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Aura. We are getting closer. We are getting closer and closer. Best case scenario has one later in this year, October to December, towards the end of this year. Best optimistic scenario. More realistic is likely in early to middle of 2021. There are about 100 candidates for vaccines across the world, Aura. There are 3 of them that are leading the horse race. 3 candidates out of all 100. You have Moderna, you have CanSino Biologics, and you have the Oxford group. They are all within that phase 2. There's 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. They are in the phase 2 stage. And so we are getting close. Phase 3 is very critical, though. That actually randomized people to get the vaccine or to get a placebo shot with no vaccine. And only then will we know, does it make a difference? But Aura, there are a lot of questions. Will it be 20% effective, 50% effective, 80% effective? Will you need 2 shots or 1 shot? Will it only work with some people and not others? There are a lot of questions still left. Even if it's effective, how effective? We don't know that yet. But those 3 horses, Moderna, CanSino Biologics, and Oxford, are the closest. And our hope is one of them crosses the finish line. Who it will be, we do not know yet.
I mean, I know that much of uncertainty lies so we
yeah.
We closer.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do see another question on how to help family and friends and also boost your own immunity. I'm going to answer that as well. And so we have had developments on the treatment frontiers, exciting ones, Aura. So there was a new study, the most effective treatment. There was a new study. It just came out a couple of weeks ago. Researchers in the United Kingdom took 6,000 patients. They randomly assigned 2,000 to get a steroid called dexamethasone and 4,000 to get placebo. And they looked at how these patients did. and it was breaking results. The most significant development to date in treatment came out of this. What did they find? They found out that the group that got the steroid ended up having 33% reduction in death, in mortality from COVID-19 if you got the steroid. So for every 100 people that were dying in the placebo group, only 66 were dying in the dexamethasone group. That was a major breakthrough to see steroids, which are cheap, generally effective. I prescribed dexamethasone dozens of times just this year to patients. It's that common of a drug medication we use for inflammation, for certain types of arthritis, for COPD, for asthma exacerbations. And so it was a really promising trial. It surprised us because dexamethasone was not had mixed results with SARS and with MERS, the cousin versions of COVID. We didn't have positive results definitively with dexamethasone before. So that was a big breakthrough. The caveat aura of that is dexamethasone. That was in critically ill, severely ill patients. These are patients with the breathing tubes down their throats into their lungs. So for severely ill patients, that's a very effective treatment now. Based on one trial, we await more evidence to confirm that. And then you have two other treatments. Remdesivir has shown some promise, and convalescent plasma, taking the antibodies out of someone else who's been infected and giving that to the person who has the infection now. Those are the three treatments with promise: steroids, remdesivir, and convalescent plasma. We have much more to learn.
Well, this is fascinating that this disease is relatively new, or maybe we've been having it since last year sometime. When are the reports that we knew about COVID-19? What are the beginning reports? I think I lost Dr. Nakashi. Are you there, Dr. Nakashi?
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. My question to you was, how early did we know that that COVID-19 existed? Because that's another big part of the conspiracy theory that some folks knew about these and won't tell people for a really long time.
All right. And so it looks like Aura is coming back in. We're just waiting for her to join in. Thank you, Jess, too. I appreciate Jess, the shout out, and Ravi, good friends from Iowa as well. I was just taking a moment to text Aura here. She's coming back into the live feed. But thank you, everyone. I hope that was helpful in terms of thinking about where we are with antibodies and immunity and vaccines, the timeline for getting that vaccine for the general population, and then also where we're at with treatments. And so that's the latest evidence as of date. But as I mentioned, a good friend of mine, Ravi, who's back in Iowa too, we are only at the beginning of understanding about COVID-19. We're maybe 25, 30% of our understanding. There's so much more yet to learn, and the science is constantly changing day by day, week by week. So there's a lot more to learn here. But we look forward to keeping everyone abreast and on top of all these developments, and really empowering you all with the science and the knowledge and the facts to be aware of what is going on, and to give reassurance and hope and certainty as to how things may unfold here moving forward in the future. So it's been a pleasure. I was excited to be here, and Aura has been a very good friend over these last few months, and a tremendous host to really have this dialogue and bring awareness to all these important issues. So I look forward to keeping folks on top of all the evidence and on top of all the data, and we'll see if Aura gets back in here in a little bit to see if she has any additional closing remarks potentially. Let's give her a second here. All right, I think she's. Okay, and I think we have Aura here. She'll be joining in a little bit. And so I guess the other couple things to just raise a little bit awareness about are that it's really important to think about the current situation we're seeing right now. And so we've seen cases increase. We've seen cases increase across many of the areas from Florida to Alabama to Texas to California. So what that generally means is this virus is still around. The virus is not gone anywhere. And we need to take extra precautions to realize that we are now in this chronic phase with COVID. We are coexisting with COVID. And so we really need to be very, very aware that that the virus hasn't changed in any way. And though we all have that feeling of being over the pandemic, I do too. You know, being in the front lines and in the front lines of this, I too feel that level of exhaustion and fatigue. But at the end of the day, this virus has not changed. And so we just have to continue to be as patient and bear with this journey we're on, most likely through 2020. Because the moment we let our guard down, the virus is ready to jump on us and jump and take advantage of its human host and all of us in society. And we've seen the detrimental effects of that on human life and in cities across this country. So that's really the other takeaway message here, is that we now have to come to being comfortable being uncomfortable coexisting with COVID. And that's really hard for us to grasp, because that's something none of us have really had to do in most of our lifetimes. We now have to be comfortable being uncomfortable with COVID, being a coexistent infection for us to live with for the time being in the months ahead. So there's a good question here from Harold Huggins on asymptomatic carriers with 9 weeks of symptoms as reported in Nature. I'm not directly familiar with that case report or that particular study. I'd love to look at that and actually analyze it. There are a lot of asymptomatic carriers out there. I did mention a study earlier here in the conversation from Diamond Cruise Ship, where about half of the people, that 400 of the 700, but people with symptoms generally have symptoms for a couple weeks of time. The contagious period is about 10 days from what the CDC has notified us, about 10 days of contagion with that infection. So it would be rather unusual for someone with 9 weeks of symptoms. I do see that in the comment. I have not seen that particular case report, but I will say more of the exception than the rule. Generally, people's symptoms last 1 to 2 weeks. 9 weeks would be quite the outlier. Question that we just got from a viewer here.
Dr. Nakhasi,
any other questions?
I have a question for you. I heard somebody that contracted COVID-19 that they had the 5-day COVID. What is that?
All right, 1 second. Let's see.
Aura,
can you hear me, Aura?
I can hear you fine. My question to you is it true that some of the COVID-19 can last for a very short time?
Let me see. I'm having...
Uh-oh. Dr. Nakhasi, can you see me? Uh-oh.
Aura, can you hear me? All right. So
I can hear you fine.
Thoughts here.
I can hear you perfect. Question to you is, is it true that there are some people that COVID-19, when they are tested positive, that only last?
Okay. So a few other items just to raise a little bit awareness of. So we had a question on asymptomatic carriers, and then we've talked about the different research updates, the treatment updates, and also vaccine updates. So that's the other thing that I think is important to highlight here is the reality about misinformation too. So there's been a lot of information. I think that's one of the common themes that we've seen here throughout this conversation is the common misconceptions that we've seen. So one of the questions here that Aura is mentioning is it true when you test positive it can last for 5 days? So that is absolutely true. When you test positive, it can actually linger, Aura, for weeks and weeks at a time. And so there have been multiple points where when you swab someone, they're initially positive, and even 2 or 3 weeks later, they can still be positive. Now, that does not always mean that they're still contagious and still have active virus. It means that we're also detecting dead particles, dead genetic material of the virus person. So most the guidelines from the CDC have shown once you test positive, you have about 10 days of symptoms where you're still contagious. So you have 10 days of contagion. As long as your fevers have gone away for 3 days, you've improved for 3 days, and it's been 10 days since the start of your symptoms, you're no longer contagious. But if you swab yourself, you still might, if a doctor swabs you or a nurse swabs you, you still might be positive because you're detecting the dead particles, the dead virus particles from the swab. And so there's an important distinction there that the questions are really good and relevant one. Can you still test positive? Yes, you can. You can test positive 5 days later, 1 week later, 2 weeks later, even up to 3 weeks later. People have tested positive from the swab. But testing positive is different than having an active infection that's ongoing. So that's an important point to kind of take note of. All right, wonderful. I can see you. I just can't hear you, but as long as you're able to see and hear me, that is fantastic. It has been a pleasure to be here. You've been a wonderful, wonderful host. I know you have spent a lot of time thinking about these issues. You're a tremendous leader and activist in our community, especially on causes that matter so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nakhasi, for being with us.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Aura. It was a tremendous pleasure to be here, and I hope this was helpful. I hope this was helpful to everyone, and we got a lot of the facts and the science out there. Thank you again, Aura, for hosting us.
It was super helpful. A few weeks when things are better. So thank you all for joining us today. This was the COVID-19 edition. Tomorrow, we're having some of the technology that is being developed to mitigate the effects of COVID-19, to clean surfaces, to use UV lighting. So we're going to have Makoma tomorrow joining us here at the VTH at 5 p.m. So don't forget, join us tomorrow. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Bye.